What's up guys, welcome to part 3 of this video tutorial series. And in the last video I showed you, well, basically stopped here and I got kind of cut off by my recording software, so sorry about that. But what we were trying to do is basically, I'm trying to show you how to append strings and kind of print using the print method. So from here what we have is the variable string that's assigned to hello world, and the comma, we're going to use a comma because it automatically adds the space for us, and then we append the string goodbye. So if we run this, what we have is hello world space goodbye because the comma adds the space for us. Now if we wanted to append this to this string, then we could say that now this is where I was getting confused last time, because in Java what you do is you can cast a string or an integer to a string by doing this or something similar to this. But in Python it's similar, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to cast it like this, and this basically just says, hey, let's take this integer value of anything and we're going to turn it into a string so that we can print it out with this string hello world. So now if we run this, you'll see that we have hello world and we still have the space 6, and so we could also run it like this plus, and because these are both strings, it's just going to append it to each other, and you'll see that there is no space. So if we wanted to add a space between these, we could do space plus, and this just basically says, hey, let's append a space between these two variables, and if we run it, you'll see we have a space. So this is obviously more complicated than just adding a comma, which is, I think, is very helpful. So now let's move on to something a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more complicated. So essentially what we have here is just, we're printing to the console, very simple, but let's say we want to print something. Let's make another variable and say, we'll call it next, I don't know, I'm just making something up, next string or next string. Why did I spell that wrong twice? Next string is equal to, this is a next line. Wow. Next line. So now you'll notice when I set this variable, I actually use single quotes instead of double quotes, which is completely fine. And the cool thing about these quotes is that when you're adding, if you want to print out quotes inside of your string, then you basically want to use the opposite of what you're using on the outside. So if I want to say this is on the inside in quotes, I would have to use double quotes, because if I use single quotes, it's actually going to think that, hey, it's the end of the statement, and now is just excluded because we have this enclosed in single quotes and this enclosed in single quotes, and is just kind of there. So what we want to do is do double quotes and say is, and that'll allow the double quotes to be printed. Now if we want to print to a next line, there's a few ways to do it. The first way is just to jump down to the next line and say, hey, let's print next string, no problem, we'll do that, and it'll work. Hey, this is a next line. But if we want to append a next line to this first print statement or this first print method, what we could do is say we'll use the plus and we'll do a \n, which basically which basically is a next line character, and the backslash escapes it, or however you want to think of it. But basically it just says we want to move to the next line and we're going to append the next string variable to the next line. So if we run this, you'll see hello world 6, which is this part right here, this right here, and then we append the next line of string, which bumps us down to the next line, and then we're going to see, hey, this is a next line, which is this part here. So if you don't know where the backslash is, it's right above your enter, and I promise you just looked at it. Even if you know that it was there, you still looked at it. So just admit that. I know you did. Let's see, what time are we at? Okay. Last time I didn't quite keep track of the time. But let's go ahead and erase this. And we're going to, let's start with, so let's say you want to print out, let's start with something easy. We'll call this price. We're going to give a price of an object, and we're going to give it $47. Now this is obviously wrong, because you cannot, what this is saying is that price is supposed to be a float because it has a decimal, but then we appended this, or we added this $sign to it, which made it give us an error. And so if we run this, we'll say, it even gives us, this is nice because it gives us exactly where the invalid syntax is. And you can see that the invalid syntax is at this point, it has a little arrow pointing to the $sign. So if we remove the $sign, then that is actually correct. And this is going to be a floating point value, which basically just means that there's a decimal in the number. It's pretty simple. I don't want to confuse it though. If we say price 2 is equal to 47, then this is going to be an integer value, where this is going to be a float value. So a float can contain any decimal, and an integer value is just going to grab the whole number, and it's going to store it as just 47. So if we wanted to print out the price of this object, we could say print price, and we'll add a space, and I'll use the plus, and we will append, actually let's use a comma, and we'll append price. But before we do that, I want to add a $sign. So that's how we would add a $sign. We would just put it inside the quotes, and then we would append the price, and we'd actually not want a space here. So I'll just do that. And we'll run it, and what is happening here? Oh, float to integer. Okay, so we have to cast this float to a string before we can print it out. And now you can see we have 47.50. So obviously it cut off the 0, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And we can, well, I guess we can, well, we'll get into that later. But I mean, that's pretty standard to where even in Java, if you have a 0 at the end, more than often it's going to cut it off, because it's saying, hey, there's nothing there, why do I need to store it? And you know, you save memory and just store 47.50. But if we put a 7 here, then it knows that there's actually a value there, and it's going to print it out. And if we do the same for price 2, so that keeps the decimal. No, that's basically what we're focused on, that it keeps the decimal. And if we put price 2, you'll notice that it's just this value. So float is very useful. I'm actually out of time right now, and I don't want it to cut me off like I did last time. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know we're kind of moving slow, but I think it's better this way, so you can get every detail about the code that you're trying to learn. So we're going to keep it at this pace, and hopefully you enjoy it, and I will see you guys next time.